Whew, we have a lot to cover about Campi Flegrei, the super volcano near Naples in Italy, guys, because it's rumbling very, very strong there. We just had that 4.4 that was way stronger than the 4.4 last May. And then we had another 3.5 today that was followed by another 2.0. So this earthquake swarm is basically also continuously rumbling since March 7th. So there's no quiet time for the people, and they're feeling these earthquakes very, very strong. Also the 3.5, again, we'll get to that in a minute. Then we have the volcanologist Mastro Lorenzo. I've reported about him very often. He wants to evacuate. Then we have a guy on TikTok that almost triggered an evacuation with what he said. It's absolutely crazy, the news. And then there's news from the INGV that basically says no signs of an imminent eruption, but we know how that goes. No signs until there is one. We've been following, for the ones that are with my channel longer, you know what I mean. If we follow volcanoes, that can change in a heartbeat. And people complaining, and this is very interesting, we have a local scientist that feels he's not being heard about the risks of the buildings. And why is that so important? You know, I'm always angry and I say, oh, they're only talking about the seismic problem. They need to talk about the volcanic problem. And they do now. They have declared the state of national mobilization today. That was decided by the government. Then we will hear, are these earthquakes, the big ones, only happen at night? Because we always see the people on the streets. Why are the damages bigger this time, with buildings collapse, people being covered in rubble so that they can't see anymore, stories are collapsing? The strongest shock that they have ever recorded at Campi Flegrei. And at the same time, evacuation route was closed. But again, I just mentioned it, local scientist felt he had to go to TikTok because he wasn't heard about the danger of the buildings. He says some buildings are just leaning on each other and they're about to collapse. And we just had a scandal between the civil defense and some builders when the civil defense had said, well, we got to do something about these buildings, because if we see a larger earthquake 5.1, which is predicted that it's likely to happen, or it could happen, we will count the people that are lost. And then the other ones were like, you can't say that, that's psychologically, and this is for construction and building, and we know how this goes, right? But you need to hear what this guy says. It's mind-blowing. So it's so much, I don't even know where to start. But what I want to do is, I want to give you the official statement of the INGV today, and on the other side, I want to give you basically also an INGV statement, because this guy works for the INGV in a leading position, from Mastro Lorenzo, what he says. And it's just not matching within the same institution. So let's start a quick look at the earthquake list. You see, these are the recent earthquakes. This is what happened. But we had about 44 to 50 earthquakes within and around that magnitude 4.4 shock, more than we see here on the list. This list always shows the most important ones. Epicenters always around the Solfatara area, although the 2.0 was in the water, but also within the same area of the Campi Flegrei. So nothing out of the usual, but it's accelerating. And guys, I need to tell you something. You need to understand what is accelerating and why we say it's accelerating. What is going on underneath this Campi Flegrei area? And I have just released a video about this, my monstrosity video. It's an hour, 40 minutes long, but I'm going through all the data from temperature measuring in the Solfatara, from the fumaroles gas emissions, CO2 emissions, sulfur emissions, earthquakes, acceleration, magma rising, hydrothermal, everything. You see the charts, you see the latest data. That also gives us an explanation what has accelerated since the earthquake swarm in February, that monstrosity of an earthquake swarm with over 1,800 earthquakes just in February, and on one day, 800 earthquakes. So you need to understand this, and that's why I made it longer, so that when I made this video, I was like, whoa, we're at a higher stage than I thought. And I really do think that the official entities are not reporting this at all. Not at all, but to the severity. Only these singled out scientists that work in leading positions of the INGV. They're saying, I'm saying this, Di Natale said, I'm saying this outside of my leading role in the INGV. This is my personal opinion as a scientist. It's crazy, guys. So let's start. Joseph Mastro Lorenzo, he works for the INGV. He has been calling for evacuations, same as Giuseppe Di Natale, who also works for the INGV. He has been begging, and then he said, for years, since 2023, these guys have been saying that. At least evacuate the red zone, they've been saying, at least. Now they're saying, well, can we at least evacuate within 2 kilometers from the center of Pozzuoli? Can we at least do that? He has always been critical, by the way, of these emergency plans. The transfer of the population from the red zone into other zones in a time frame of 72 hours. And everything's based on the A56, the Autobahn. It's an outer route. It's a tangentiale, how they call it, with a lot of bridges and seismically maybe not so stable areas. They say it's stable now, but they have just announced because it was closed when the 4.4 happened. Let's say an evacuation would have been triggered, it would have been closed. Only one emergency lane was open, so that the director of the INGV was not able to get into his office in time because the road was blocked. And he was surprised about that. He didn't even know about that. And construction is going to last until the end of 2027, by the way. So the volcano better not erupts. So Mastro Lorenzo, he has always said, you need better plans. You need to come up with something that works. And you need to not only consider the seismic risk, you also need prepare for the worst, for a volcanic eruption. And he doesn't think that this is so unlikely, at least not a phreatic eruption. And in light of that, guys, since we're talking about the seismicity and the collapsing buildings, I have made a video about Pompeii because they have found new, you can't even say the word on YouTube because then your video gets pushed out of the algorithm. That's YouTube. The unalived people that were unalived by that Vesuvius eruption. You see these like stone-like unalived humans. They have found more, but there was something that told them the volcano itself didn't and they've been before, and that is new. So check out the video in the end screen. So evacuation, the anxiety and the concern of the citizens in Italy does not subside. They're angry. They're on the streets. They feel that they're not being helped. Some of them call for evacuation. They're saying, we love our home. We can't take it anymore. This is too much. So fear is even greater after this 4.4 that was recorded as not only the strongest earthquake since the beginning of this Brady seismic crisis since 2005, but also the strongest ever recorded with respect to the phenomenon of ground uplift in the area and acceleration. Acceleration, it was shaking the building stronger. It was a very shallow earthquake, and now the ground uplift is also 3 centimeters. But it has been 3 centimeters for 3 weeks now, but they haven't told us. They had in the bulletin, not this week's bulletin, not the last bulletin of the last week said 3 centimeters, but the one before said 1.5 centimeters, although they just released it's 3 centimeters for at least 3 weeks. So I'm like, why didn't they say anything? It's a kind of strange. Maybe it's just an error of communication. I don't know, guys. But people are now posting on Facebook, and they said, guys, you should go to schools. You should live in the schools because these are still the safest buildings. The other ones are probably not safe. And after that February earthquake swarm, yeah, they did send out the fire trucks, the firemen and engineers to check the buildings for stability, because that continues rattling. That puts a strain on these old buildings. But residents were complaining. They said, well, they're just coming in, have a quick look, and then they leave. We need a structural, really an engineering report, whether we are safe or not. So they had to evacuate now 10 more buildings in Bagnoli, 10 families, a newborn baby. There were injuries. They have set up a permanent collection point of people inside the former NATO base of Bagnoli, and they have, at the request of the government, declared the state of national mobilization by the Campania region government. And then there's still this debate about what measures they should adopt now in the face of this Brady seismic crisis that is right now generating more fear than ever amongst the citizens and residents. So the volcanologist Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo, he has been criticizing the whole thing, the whole planning and preparation since at least 2023. And he was now asked today for an analysis of the current situation. And I value his opinion very, very much. He says strongly, and he said that before the 3.5 now hit, he said the possibility, and he's wording this carefully, the possibility of evacuating the population in the red zone must be evaluated. And we know they were trying to change the alert levels, add more alert levels so that they would not have to change the alert level to orange, because that would mean evacuate the red zone. So they were speaking of dark yellow. They still haven't raised it, not even to their new level, dark yellow. So Mastrolorenzo is saying evaluate the evacuation of the population around Pozzuoli, because that's where most of the epicenters are. And Mastrolorenzo also relates to that, where many people said it was crude and probably untactful. The statement released just a few weeks ago by the head of the civil protection, Fabio Siciliano, he said in the event of a magnitude 5 shock, the unalived would be counted. That still echoes. More so after the 4.4 shock. And from this statement of the civil defense is where Mastrolorenzo's reasoning starts. And he says, quote, "There's no defense that holds up against earthquakes if you do not live in earthquake-proof buildings." Yep. And moreover, the head of the civil protection himself has clearly said that in the event of a stronger shock, there would be a risk of buildings collapsing and consequently of victims, many victims. So his reasoning starts from the identification of the area in which most of the epicenters of the seismic phenomena linked to the Brady seismic crisis of recent times have been recorded. So he says, quote, "In 2023, the emergency plan for Brady seismic risk," that's the land rise, the earthquakes, was created, which concerns an area that includes about 80,000 people between Pozzuoli, Bagnoli, because it was highlighted that apart from the volcanic risk, which is always present, he says, always present, Brady seismic phenomena and therefore earthquakes. And now we have also seen the risk from carbon dioxide or even phreatic explosions or even the same deformation of the soil. In the case of an escalation of these risks, it was expected that the population would be transferred to areas far from those at higher risks. And that's not happening. And I just released my monstrosity video that, gosh, this police is loud, right? Isn't it loud? Sorry for that, guys. And they're making this weird noise that is not the same one. It's I don't know what they're doing. So in my video, I have shown you all the data. And when you see that, again, it's long, but watch it. If you're interested in that, it's a must to watch it, and watch it till the end, please, so that the algorithm supports my video. Then you understand, wow, it's worse than I thought, and it has progressed towards the point where the last eruption was when it happened, when Monte Nuovo was created in the 1500s. We're not that far away from that. And that was a bigger eruption. So a smaller phreatic eruption, I don't think it's that unlikely. But it's not happening. I know they have evacuated Pozzuoli in the 1980s when that crisis happened and then nothing happened. But you have to understand, and also again, my monstrosity video explains that. There was something happening. There was a magma intrusion. Magma just didn't find the way to the surface because the caprock layer was strong. That same caprock layer has only a third of the strength left now through all the rumbling and raising. It's weak. But we have a bigger crisis and we have more land rise. Again, watch the monstrosity video. So according to Mastro Lorenzo, the possibility of evacuation should be evaluated starting from a perimeter that is not that of the National Emergency Plan. So with the 4 levels of risk, but that with the specific measures that are foreseen for the red area according to the 2023 Brady Seismic Emergency Plan. In that plan, a large red area is indicated. That includes around 80,000 people, and a more restricted one that includes 30,000 people. When Mastro Lorenzo was asked, well, which should be the area on which they should evaluate the evacuation, then he said, I don't have to say it because it can be planned by the National Civil Protection. What is certain from a scientific point of view is that in all the present and past crises, the epicenters of the earthquakes have been distributed within a radius of 1.5 to 2 kilometers. So 1 to 1.5 miles from the center of Pozzuoli. All the strongest earthquakes are in this area. Both the one on March 12th and 13th, the 4.4, and the one on May 20th, 2024, the other 4.4. But we also had one in 2023, a 4.2. And he says, for this area, the possibility of a temporary transfer of the population must be evaluated, and it is not certain that they are already evaluating it. So he's very carefully saying, evacuate. Why are you not even thinking about that? It's a lot of bureaucracy and meeting and discussing and meeting. It doesn't matter if you call it dark orange, dark yellow, or whatever. Do something. That's my opinion. Do something. And I think the willingness of the population right now to leave is far greater than it was like in January. Because what this is right now, it's an anomalous crisis, far too long, and with strong shocks, many strong earthquakes. For many, many years, Giuseppe Mastro Lorenzo has been among the most critical experts regarding the institutional measures implemented in response to that Brady seismic crisis. His strong statements are therefore not surprising right now. And I've reported about this many, many times. And they are based on specific studies conducted over all these years. I have reported about these studies as well. He says, what I say is that from both the point of view of Brady seismic risk and volcanic risk, we are not in a position to make predictions. That is true. And guys, I keep seeing this in the comments. This other YouTuber says it's not serious and it's just fear-mongering and it's not going to erupt. Honestly, guys, I don't watch other YouTubers that report about the same topics that I do. I've never watched a single video and I don't really care what they say. That's their personal opinion and they might be geologists or whoever. I really don't care, guys. This channel I'm reporting about what the official entities are saying, but I'm also picking out single scientists, international scientists, but also the local scientists that are surveilling this. That should know better than any other, whoever they are, right? And of course, I'm giving you my personal opinion. And of course, I'm getting upset if I read things like I'm siding with Mastro Lorenzo. I'm siding with Di Natale. I'm siding with Roberto Scandone. All three guys leading positions in the INGV and Vesuvius Observatory for a very long time. Seasoned scientists, right? This is what I do, guys, and this is what you get from me. I'm reading all these studies and I try to summarize them for you so that they're not too scientific. I try to leave out all the formula and all that stuff. I'm not trying to be carried away by that. I have studied math for a very long time because I have a master in computer science, amongst some others. But that's why I like to read that stuff. And by the way, I have a geology background. I've been doing some geological research in Mongolia and in China and in Spain and in Peru and for many, many years digging boreholes and doing all that stuff. You probably haven't known that. I think I should make a channel trailer and tell you all about that. But that just on a side note. So Mastro Lorenzo also, what he says is not coming from a gut feeling. It's from the scientific studies, the same studies that the INGV is conducting and it is a part of. That's why it's so controversial, in my opinion, that officially the INGV says something else and that the INGV's own leading scientists have to say, I'm not speaking for the INGV right now. I'm speaking from my own scientific standpoint. That is weird, right? You get it? So he says, well, after all, it is known to everyone that earthquakes cannot be predicted. Many of my viewers that are coming from somebody else who's really good at doing that, right? But let's say the official opinion is it cannot be predicted. So all the institutional measures that are implemented concern risk reduction and relief for the population. So Mastro Lorenzo's reasoning is based on the evidence of some characteristics of this bradyseismic crisis that would characterize it as particularly anomalous. That's why I watched my monstrosity video in the end screen. He says, quote, it's a much longer crisis. The 1918 crisis was 2 years. Now, this one's been going since 2005, guys, almost 20 years. And he says, with much lower deformation rates, 2 centimeters last year, 1 centimeters up to a month ago, now 3 centimeters. But all this has produced the most violent shocks of the strongest magnitude ever detected, since they can detect it at Campi Flegrei. And also, without a doubt, the current bradyseismic crisis is particularly long compared to those detected before because it started in 2005. That's when the land rise began to start. And we had previously bradyseismic crisis like from 1969 to 1972 and a significant one from 1982 to 1984. And again, comparing to those, he says, it is an objectively anomalous process. Objectively, right? He's making that clear. He really underlines that. And watch the monstrosity video, then you know what he means. You see all the graphs, all the data, and you see how they're doing the surveillance and where they're getting it from. And also he says, in addition to the flow of gases, which is enormously higher than in the past. We will also look at that in the monstrosity. And meanwhile, the INGV has announced that the current seismic swarm has ended. What? We just had the 3.5 and the 2.2. I really don't get it, guys. They are saying that in addition to the most important shock of this crisis, the magnitude 4.4, there have been a total of 44 shocks, 9 of which were greater than magnitude 1. And they're saying, in short, the alarm is over until the next swarm. Yeah, I mean, it depends, they said, how do you define a swarm? I define it if I have several earthquakes every day the swarm is ongoing, even if I have a few hours break in between. So let's look at what the INGV says. Now that we know what Mastro Lorenzo is saying, and check out my previous videos, I go in more detail how he thinks that this thing could be creeping towards an eruption. So the INGV says, we explain to you now why the seismic activity will continue at Campi Flegrei and there are no signs of an imminent eruption. So that is the Vesuvius Observatory of the INGV, their one institution. They said they have analyzed the situation of the caldera and the expected scenarios. And we've heard that from them in the last few days. Right now, there is no sign of an imminent eruption. If you watch my channel and we look at Iceland, Svartsengi, they could also say, right now, there is no sign of an imminent eruption. But we know land rise, magma chambers filling up, it's coming. It can come tomorrow, it can come in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, but it's coming. And same here, it is coming, most likely. Not that soon, hopefully, like the one in Iceland. But just saying, if you say right now, that can change in 1 minute. As we've seen in Iceland, all of a sudden, this strong earthquake swarm, the escalation for an hour or so, and then poof, there's an eruption. Of course, Iceland, total different kind of volcano, not comparable. I'm just saying, this is just the usual official blah, blah, blah. Like Di Natale said, and like Mastro Lorenzo has said, well, you know, if they're saying that they're closely monitoring this thing, doesn't mean that they can guarantee safety, but they're closely monitoring it until that second when they see, oh, we're just monitoring that it has erupted. Or we're just monitoring that there's a 5-point-something earthquake and half of Pozzuoli has collapsed. Or Naples. You know what I mean? So INGV says, yeah, it is now known that the 4.4 that occurred on March 13th was the most intense ever recorded in the caldera. And it was a seismic swarm of 44 earthquake. And starting from this intense seismic event, the Vesuvius Observatory of the INGV, that's the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology, has analyzed the current situation of the Brady seism, the seismic phenomenon that characterizes the Campi Flegrei. Also there, Di Natale says it doesn't characterize Campi Flegrei. It only shows up before and after an eruption. It can take several years, yeah, no problem. But Campi Flegrei has, and it's proven, shown phases of 1200 years of being totally quiet and then 100 years of totally quiet. So this is not normal and it has always been like this. And again, Giuseppe Di Natale works for the INGV in a leading position. So they say, yeah, the seismic phenomenon that characterizes Campi Flegrei is characterized by lowering and raising of the ground and the expected scenarios. The Vesuvius Observatory reiterated once again that further earthquakes are expected in the caldera, but there are no signs of an imminent eruption. Of course, they expect further earthquakes because the pressure pot is getting hotter. More pressure is building up. Again, monstrosity video explains that. And with the increased land rise, there's more pressure building, more rocks are getting brittle, the crust is breaking. That's why we see the earthquakes. That is nothing what they're saying here that calms me down. So they say, in this case, as it happened in previous Brady seismic crises in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, also in the current one that began in 2005. And it has many points of similarity with past crises. The uplift of the ground and the seismic activity are destined to continue, making possible new shocks of intensity comparable or greater than that recorded at first light yesterday possible. So, and then they say the latest data, moreover, has revealed that the uplift rate in recent weeks has increased. Yeah, going from 1 centimeters starting from the summer of 2024 to 3 centimeters. And then they're saying in the general framework in which deformations and seismicity at Campi Flegrei continue to be closely associated, the 4.4 earthquake fits into a context of a rapidly increasing uplift rate. Oh, rapidly increasing uplift rate. What does that mean for a volcanic system? Right? So that uplift rate, that was not detected during the event of the same magnitude on May 2024. There it was not increasing that significantly. Their conclusion is, although, therefore, the uplift of the ground and the seismic events are destined to continue, as mentioned, taking into account the constant detections carried out by the Vesuvius Observatory. We're closely monitoring this. There are no signs that an imminent eruption may occur in the Campi Flegrei. In fact, no movements of magma towards the surface or significant geophysical anomalies are detected. Okay, that is strange because there are studies out there that say exactly the opposite with participation of the INGV. Again, look at the monstrosity video. So now you understand what I said at the beginning, right? How this clashes. Is this just stay calm, do not all panic, because around Campi Flegrei there's more than 6 million people, and the main evacuation route is under construction, under repair until 2027. So the whole evacuation plan in an emergency, like not a controlled evacuation that they could do now. The emergency, like red alert emergency thing, is based on 72 hours, and the volcano might not even give them 72 hours because in their own studies they have found the magma might have already an explosive state, and Master Lorenzo has said that. So they're basically saying, well, there's no evidence that magma is rising, but their own scientists said, well, the magma is already in an explosive state. You know what I'm hinting at? This is what I know it's difficult, you know. You don't want to create a panic or making people leave. But on the other hand, some politicians are saying we should try to permanently have this Campi Flegrei area uninhabited. But that's easier said than done. So the government would have to pay out the people, similar to what they're doing in Grindavik, maybe. And then there's a TikToker from Naples, Keko Denny. He has posted a video of a risk of earthquake between Giuliano and Aversa, and panic did break out. That's why the counselor has written to the prefect saying that's misleading information and they should intervene immediately. So this guy has obviously 420,000 followers and 13.4 million likes on TikTok. And less than 24 hours after the strong 4.4 earthquake, he has published a video and he says, I received a message, prepare your bag. And then a panic broke out among the citizens. And the video, once he had published it, it went quite viral and reached 355,000 views. And then many people called the fire department and they were frightened and they were asking the stuff, what's happening? I mean, something did happen, right? We had another 3.5. The officials said, no, we couldn't pretend nothing happened and just let it go. So they have sent a report to the police headquarters and we will have to see what's coming out of that. So what has the guy said? He said, they say in the next few hours, if that's true, we need to be prepared to run. They sent me a voice message on personal WhatsApp where they say that things are not well. Obviously, the fear is great and everything we hear scares us. I hope that what is being heard around never happens. But in any case, we never neglect our attention. And he also says, guys, I had an important warning from a family friend who works in the fire department regarding the seismic earthquakes tonight. He warned us that in the volcanic parameter, there are strong tensions for tonight, for this day, these hours, for the areas of Giuliano that have been less affected. They told me to prepare my bag too, to start running right away in case something ever happens. In case it's true, we must do as they tell us. I hope I have not scared you, but my family friends warned me, so I prefer to also consult and warn my fans. Then he released a second video and said, here it seems to me that we are all taking it lightly. It doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And then if it does happen, then they hadn't warned us. I received a family information, confidential, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't mean that something necessarily has to happen, because I would be the first to be afraid. However, if it were to happen, I'm already packing my bag. And then he says, I want to point out that it's not something that I said, but the message was forwarded to me. And it goes on like this. So, yeah, I think it's not good, right? Maybe it's true. It could be true. Who knows, right? I'm sure that they have internal alarms after the 4.4 that this could be a pre-shock, that there could be a bigger one, that they have their departments on alert should there's something happening, that they can go and help people. But I think that is clear for everyone. That was clear for the residents, because after the 4.4, they slept in their cars. They were gathering in basketball fields and stuff like this. They didn't go back to their houses, so they were expecting something. And, it's Mastro Lorenzo said, well, let's think about evacuating this area. But of course, this should come from official scientists. So for me, it is coming from Mastro Lorenzo and others. It's just sad that kind of what some official version is, that's a little bit more smoothly, right? I understand politicians don't want to create panic, and I'm not saying that they're wrong with what they're saying. It's just my feeling, right? If the scientists that work for the institution say something different than the whole institution, it's raising my alert level. But yeah, I'm not supporting like something that he did. He should not have done that, because I've heard from someone who heard from someone. That's usually never good, right? And guys, I know this is a long video, but you need to hear this. And I've said it at the beginning. Francesco Mozzarella, I really like mozzarella, but he's mozzarella with an A. Oh gosh, I love Italian food, by the way. He's an engineer from Naples, and he's telling his story. And he writes, and I'm quoting him, I'm reading what he said on TikTok. He said, "Good morning, dear friends. I feel obligated to give this interview on TikTok actually as an explanation on the structural state of Naples." And he's not only talking about Pozzuoli. He says, "I have been an engineer, merit senator, and an expert on building structures for 55 years. On the day of the 1980 earthquake, I was commissioned by the government to investigate the Spanish quarters for damage that tragic November night." And he says, "For days I was on the road with the Carabinieri, that's the police, to clear buildings and then secure many of them, several hundred in number. I have witnessed firsthand how catastrophic the state of the building substance is in the Spanish quarters, in the health district, in Cavone and other areas of Naples. Buildings only stand because they lean on each other. If you remove a single tough stone, sand and dust will come out." And by the way, we have seen that dust in one of the videos that were filmed during the 4.4 and after the 4.4. So he says there is no more mortar between the stones, nothing that holds the structure together. Chestnut wood ceilings are 400 years old on average. They were originally designed only for one-story buildings, but in recent centuries, 4 to 5 more floors have been erected on them. This is a construction sin that defies every logic. The buildings should not actually stand anymore. That sounds super, super scary. Plus, we have a lot of illegal buildings right on the volcano, around the calderas, around the Solfatara. He says, "I have appealed to the relevant authorities several times. Should an earthquake of 1980s magnitude with the epicenter in Naples or in the province repeat, there will be a disaster the size of an atomic bomb." And in light of that, watch the Pompeii video. What happened to these people? And he further says, guys, "A large part of the buildings are decomposed. not earthquake proof, degradable and actually uninhabitable, but are inhabited. The only explanation why they're still standing is the mutual support through neighboring buildings. So the buildings are leaning on each other. But as soon as a horizontal quake hits, like it causes a strong earthquake, these houses will collapse like cardboard boxes. And problem is, these quakes are very shallow. And the last quake, the 4.4, had the strongest acceleration ever recorded, meaning the strongest shaking for these houses. And he says, I'm not talking about a few unalived people here. We're talking about, and here it comes, guys, hundreds of thousands when a strong earthquake hits. This is an area with more than 6 million people between Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius and around. And he says the authorities need to act immediately. And he says, finally, the city administration must take serious measures to secure the building structures. But what's going on, he asks? The monuments are blocking everything. They're banning renovations because they want to preserve historic building substance. Gosh, guys. And he says, I say, let monument maintenance take care of the real monuments. But finally give engineers and construction companies a chance to renovate or replace these brittle buildings. I can say this with full conviction and seriousness. After 55 years of experience as an engineer who knows every corner of this city, it's time to face reality. We must protect our heritage, but only if it's stable and secure. A building may look antique on the outside, but on the inside, it must be steel or concrete structures that would hold it up tight. The way it is now, it's an unbelievable risk to the population. He said, I saw hundreds of unalived people in 1980. The image is etched in my memory forever. And if we do not act, it will happen again. The small earthquakes are a warning and we ignore them. That's what he's saying. These constant tremors are harbors of something greater. Of course, no one can tell exactly when it will happen, but that doesn't mean we can't be idling on standby. We may still have time to secure the region, but we need to act now. Exclamation mark after exclamation mark. And he says, I'm not saying the Spanish Quarter or other districts should be demolished, but we need to remove the rotten structures and preserve only what is actually stable and safe. It takes courage to clean the table. Wow. And then he says, what happens when a 7 or 8 magnitude earthquake strikes? Then everything will be ruined, worse than after an atomic bomb. This is the reality we have to accept. Yeah, because Italy is an earthquake-prone region with so much tectonic activity aside from all the volcanoes. He says, I urge the city council to have the courage to face this reality. We can't live forever with this ticking time bomb. Buildings are standing right now, and this is crazy, not because of their stability, but because of gravity and mutual support that they're giving each other. A horizontal tremor would cause everything to collapse. And he says the problem is, there are people who always say no in a reflective manner. That's true with bureaucracy. They are blocking every suggestion, every renovation project, every solution, but they need to stop blindly standing against everything. But that's, if you have too much bureaucracy, this is often what happens. You need to slim that down. He says, stop binding Naples to its maroon heritage. We need the courage to remove the lazy and the dangerous. He says, because these old buildings are not only collapsible, they no longer comply with today's living standards. No elevators, no heaters, no proper ventilation, no isolation. The houses are temporarily patched together without any technical basis. There's a disaster waiting to happen, a disaster on standby. And then he says, I therefore demand the city administration and the Ministry of Cultural Goods must stop blocking everything. Allow the renovations. Stop just saying no on principle. It's easy to always say no, that's done quickly, but a real solution requires courage and responsibility. From bureaucrats, good luck. And what happens when a really big disaster happens? He's asking. Day by day, week by week, we are experiencing the warning signs. And then what if the big earthquake hits? He says. Who will be held responsible then? And we've seen Rome in a big earthquake, how the buildings looked there. Devastating. That's the same kind of buildings. Then we stand on the rubble of our city, see our loved ones buried beneath the stones, and wonder why nobody did anything. He says, I'm speechless after the earthquake tonight. It's like the earth is saying to us, look out, I'm coming soon. That's what he's saying. He says, the Phlegraean fields, the Campi Phlegraei, are not a harmless phenomenon. Any quake can trigger a chain reaction, whether it's from a stronger earthquake or even an eruption. We must not remain idle any longer. I appeal to all officials and decision makers. Don't make decisions alone. Create laws that work. Bring experts and engineers to the table to find real solutions. Naples is in jeopardy, but if we act now, maybe we can prevent another disaster. Thank you for your attention. Wow. I put the link to this video in the description of this video. This is, gives me a little bit shivers, right? Because I think he's right with what he says, and it doesn't need a 7 or 8. That might not happen in this area. But again, they have published this, that the scientists say magnitude 5 or 5.1 is enough to cause disaster. The civil protection guy said it. He said, we will count the unalived. And many of them. And he has received backlash. This is not something you can say. You're creating fear. This is psychologically not good. But who criticized him? Big builders that have multi-million-dollar building projects right at the Solfatara crater. It sounds like even a Marriott hotel is being planned there, right at the Fumaroles, right where we probably, if there was ever an eruption, would probably be right there. So absolutely crazy, crazy, guys. So guys, I'm losing my voice. I'll end this video here, but I'll soon release another update because there's more stuff that I found and that I want to tell you. I hope you liked this video. And if you did this, leave it a like, share it with your friends. If you want to support the channel, look at the links in the description. You become a monthly supporting member of the channel and you get some background information from me with all these videos that I make for my channel members. Or if you want to buy me a coffee on my buymeacoffee.com/silky site, it's greatly appreciated if you do so. And thank you for your supers here on YouTube, and thank you for the coffees, for the members. I love to have you there. Welcome to all the new members. There's going to be an update very, very soon, and I see you in the next one. Click here for the monstrosity. Bye-bye.